Hello, my name is Mordred Viking and I'd like to welcome you to this stream of Europa Universalis IV, but this is something a little bit different, as you can probably tell. This is not Earth. Oh no, this is Anbennar, which is basically fantasy EU4, where you can play as the Dwarves, the Elves, the Gnolls, the Gnomes, the Halflings, Orcs, Goblins, Kobolds, Harpies, Centaurs, Ogres, and probably a whole bunch of other humans, bunch of other things which I haven't even thought of and have not yet even spotted. There is a lot going on here, and I am really quite excited for this. But before we get into that, I should probably say Donbassos coming in with a 39-month resubscription. Thank you very much for the ongoing support there, Donbassos. Really do appreciate that. Whoop whoop! Ovdal Kanzad, here we go! Then we've got Magpie coming in with a 13-month resubscription. Huzzah! 13 months of Viking raids. Very much appreciate that as well. Foxen coming in with a 5-month resub. Thank you very much for the ongoing support as well, Foxen. And then we've got Fear My Games, Evil Parlay, Bloodbath, and Sil for the win. Thank you very much for the follows. Welcome to the channel. Good to have you joining us. Nice to see you took my suggestion for playing a game of Anbennar. I mean, lots of people have been saying it recently, and it's been on my radar, honestly, for quite a long time. But I watched Arumba's playthrough with the Dwarves. I don't usually watch a huge amount of Arumba because he's way too min-maxy for my tastes. But his playthrough with the Dwarves was really interesting, and showed me just how actually complete the mod is. Like, my fear with mods is always that they're partially done, especially the really ambitious ones, but no, it actually looks like this one is pretty there. There's a lot going on. Obviously it's a mod. Mods basically are always in development, but yeah, I like it a lot. So what are we doing today? Well, shame I don't know anything about this setting. Well, that's okay, because I'm hoping that I can explain a little bit for you. In fact, it's probably a good idea right now to do a bit of a primer. So we have here, this is kind of the original area, and as you can see, it is packed full of different nations. Then this is the Dame's Head. As you can see, looking west, you can kind of see a Marge Simpson kind of figure. So looking that way, mirrored. And around the Dame's Head are the most populous of the human nations, and also half-elven nations, and also halflings and gnomes, and some of the elves. Basically, we have this city here, which is Anbennar, which is basically the Constantinople of this setting. It is the most developed. This is a one-province minor with 53 development. That's basically the capital of the empire. And if we switch over to the Imperial map mode, we can see that we've got a Holy Roman Empire type thing, currently controlled by Wex. There are going to be a whole bunch of names and things like these. Collectively have a name. I don't remember what it is. You can check that over on the wiki, though. Which I should probably create a link to. Is this D&D? Yes. Yes, it is. So all of the characters are like that. So most of the factions over here are human. The way it worked is the Elves came from another continent, which I'm not going to scroll over to because I want to leave some surprises as the game goes on. And there was this big calamity called the Day of Ashes. Yeah, the Day of Ashes, where the elven continent basically exploded, and all the elves, well, the survivors of the elves, got on a big boat, or a big fleet, and set sail, basically hoping to find Ashen Sky, thank you, Day of the Ashen Sky, trying to find a new place to live, because even to set foot on their old lands was to die. It was basically massive radiation fallout type thing. I don't think it actually was radiation, it was a magical thing. Elves are super magical in this. But they set sail, and eventually they landed here in the Dame's Head and were taken in by the people of this island and joined. Basically started to intermarry and everything like that with the humans. And the lineages, which are half-elven, tended to be the noble lineages, because the nobles got to marry the elves. The elves had the magical essence, they intermingled with the humans, and now half-elves can do magic. Humans can technically do it as well, but just not nearly as powerful as the elves can, and the half-elves are kind of a bit in the middle. So most of the royal and noble families of the territories here are half-elven. So it's kind of interesting. The half-elves in D&D are usually kind of sidelined a little bit, whereas here they've definitely got a position of power. I think the Empire is actually called Anbennar, not that I've looked into them. Been sitting in the ancient forest to the east of my boys. Yeah, we'll be talking about that in a moment. Then you do have a couple of pockets of other races. So for example here, Bipek, we've got halflings. These are the halfling nations. They come... Oh, Canorian. The people of this area collectively are called the Canorians. But the people of Bipek are actually half-elves. This is... sorry, halflings. This is a halfling city. It's one of very few that there are, because the halflings tended to be somewhat subservient to the other races, just because they weren't that interested in power. But this is the major halfling city of this area. They also have this area here, which is called Viswall. We've got South Viswall and North Viswall, and both of these are also halfling settlements. So if you want to play as the halflings, this is where you got to play. Now, Viswall is interesting because there is a big power struggle between Garwed and Laurent. Garwed and Laurent are two of the major powers. Like, I think Garwed's supposed to be like France? Or maybe Laurent. No, Laurent's probably supposed to be like France, and I guess Garwed's kind of like England. But they are in a bit of a power struggle, basically for dominance over this area, because Wex, I think, has got this area pretty much nailed in. You can see that neither of them are in the Holy Roman Empire. And one of the really big conflicts between them split the city of Viswall in half. And the halflings of Viswall rose up, were smashed, but still are kind of in control of that area. Russia and France. Okay, Garwood being Russia, Laurent is French. Cool. So that is some of the politics here. You've got the Anbennar Empire, I guess we'll call them, Garwood and Laurent in kind of a three-way power struggle over the Dame's Head. Then you've got over here kind of an interesting thing going on. You've got the blue scales and the red scales. These are kobolds. And they have appeared and wiped out pretty much the gnomes. So the gnomes used to be settling up here, but now have been pushed out to these little islands. So you've got Nimsgard, which are basically the boat gnomes. This is almost certainly going to be my second playthrough, because these guys sound really interesting, and I like the idea of like nautical gnomes. It's a cool concept. So you got the gnomes up there, basically with the ambition to retake the territories from the kobolds after the kobold invasion. I think it was basically a bunch of dragons just went and wiped out this area. Something like that. So that is the history, kind of this area. That's where most of my knowledge is. However, if we go a little bit further to the east, we can see that there is this big open area over here. This did actually used to be a fourth human kingdom, or maybe part of these guys. No, I think it was a fourth one. And they died. They got wiped out by something which emerged from the mountains. And those were not actually the dwarves. The dwarves were kind of the casualties of this as well. So there was a big catastrophe known as the Greentide, which was basically all of the orcs and the goblins came out of their hidey holes in the mountains, swept out, and attacked this kingdom here, and smashed them. And basically wiped out the human nations. Now, the ruler of the Greentide died, like, just before the start of this game. And so all of the orc nations have been disunified. They're now in a state of chaos, and there is an opportunity here. So you've got loads of these little guys. For example, the Brave Brothers. You've got the Iron Hammers. Oh, are these dwarves? They are dwarves. Okay, so there is one dwarven adventurer group outside already, a surface dwarf. I said yesterday during my other introduction that there weren't. Sword Covenant, and then a whole bunch of others. These are all adventurer companies or mercenary bands who've basically said, right, there's an opportunity here. We should try and take over this land and basically become the new kingdom. These are... There is a lot of stuff which could happen here, and over time I'm hoping that we see this starting to coalesce into new nations, which is a really cool idea. You kind of have a far more dynamic rise of different powers depending on how they actually do in the local affairs, and then probably in time starting to rise to such an extent where they could start to rival against these guys too. So I'm excited to see what happens here. Now, the way that they have modelled the Greentide is also very smart, because in all of these colonizable territories there are lots and lots and lots of very aggressive, very ferocious natives. Those natives in this world? The orcs. So in this area anyway. So basically you have the remnants of the Greentide, which still dominate this area, but because they're so disunited, this is technically colonizable, because these little factions can basically go in, wipe out the orcs, and then take over that land themselves. It's a really, really cool concept, and I'm very excited to see what goes on with that. Then if we actually go over to the mountains, and you'll see that the mountains have these weird straight roads and then these kind of more cavernous looking structures, and you can see it is actually under the mountain. These are the former dwarven territories of the Dwarven Mountains. We've got some other mountains down here called Arg something, and then over here that's also Dwarven technically. I think there's a third set. 1, 2, no, that's 3. And then there is actually another mountain keep up there, but we'll talk about them in a minute. They are still feeling the effects of the Greentide. The Greentide, like I said, emerged from the... Don't believe the Greentide's what destroyed... It's what put the nail in the coffin of the dwarves. Like, there was... The dwarves, generally, anyway, were in a period of long decline. And the rise up of the orcs smashed what was left of the dwarven bits, and then they flooded out into the human territories. But this area is basically in the same circumstance as this area. It is now empty-ish. There are still a bunch of native orcs which you will need to destroy, but you can basically recolonize the mountains, and to do that there are a couple of expeditions. So for example, you've got the Azra expedition, which are dwarves, and they are going to go into the mountains and basically seek out a new area to settle and create a hold. So you've got Kugdir, for example. Anything which is square, like this, is a dwarf hold. So Azra, if they were kind of dull, could just go there and then settle. Now, how do they do that? Well, the expeditions, including these guys, are all migratory. So they use the Native American mechanics. They can move around until they find a spot that they actually want to settle, and then create basically a new tag. Actually, I don't know if there's new tags for the human stuff. There are definitely new tags for the dwarves. So the Azra expedition, if they go to Kugdir, they become the nation of Kugdir with a new idea set, because you'll see that they have just generic adventure ideas, which helps them moving around and clearing the tunnels. But once they find a hold, they can settle in it and then basically create a new dwarven realm. And there are a couple of those guys. There are actually 5 of them. So if we sit down to the Children of Dwarven, we've got the Azra expedition. We have the Silverforge expedition. Silverforge, I think, is related to Silverforge, which is the dwarven realm in the Dameshead area. I think they're the only one. So there's a surface dwarf here. There's a surface dwarf here. Then I think technically Azra were surface, but they've decided to go exploring the former dwarven tunnels. I don't know where Azra come from. Like, Silverforge expedition's clearly from Silverforge. I don't know where Azra is from. There's nowhere called Azra. Then we've got the company of Duran Blueshield, who is over here in the eastern side of the mountains. We've got the Ruby Company down here in the southern bit of the western mountains. And then we've got the Blackbeard Cartel, who are in the southern mountain range. And then outside of those 5 expeditions, you also have 5 dwarf holds which survived. So there are a couple of groups which either have already been settled by expeditions, or they survived the Greentide and the destruction of the rest of the nation through whatever means. So the first one over here is Seghirdir. And the interesting thing about them is they were actually conquered by elves. So Akrasur, these guys, are actually Sun Elves. The Sun Elves conquered Seghirdir and occupied it for a time. They were eventually booted out by the dwarves, and the dwarves retook that territory. But because of the power of those two combined, plus the humans of the southern area, these guys have basically become a very cosmopolitan, very mixed area, and I think still work together. Yes, dwarves hold grudges in this. They very much are pissed, and in fact some of their ideas are about being pissed off at the elves, learnings from the Sun Elven occupation, for example. But they are now kind of working together in this region. And I think that could have an interesting side effect, because the dwarves having so much elven interaction could maybe get magic. I think that would be an interesting thing to do with Seghirdir, is try to basically make a magocracy based on the elven interests. So that's them. Then we've got Verkol Gulan, who survived because they basically shut themselves in behind 3 golden doors. And Verkol Gulan is stupidly rich. So their hold, which is right here, sits on top of a massive gold deposit. And it is so wealthy that the dwarves actually have to restrict their mining through laws and regulations to stop themselves spiraling into an inflation thing. There's an entire guild dedicated simply to stopping the dwarves from mining, the Magisters, which is kind of an interesting one, but they are super into mercenaries because they're just stupendously wealthy. Then we've got Arg Ulston, which is here, kind of hard to see because they're white on a grey background, but these guys are sitting on top of a diamond mine, and I think a large part of the diamond mine has been mined already, and the way that the diamonds form is through vertical lava tubes. So they mined straight down through the lava tubes, and then we're left with these really long pits, but still with the mining infrastructure, like with the cranes and the elevators and everything like that. So they then started to build around these pits into building them into workshops and stuff. So these guys are now super crafty. They have a massive bonuses to production. So I think that would be kind of interesting. Then we've got Ovdal Ludum, which are the ones that I really like. These guys survived. These guys are the originals. These are the OGs. These guys are the ones who turtled down and did the most dwarven of dwarven things. And yeah, they did their thing and survived. So they have loads, and they're actually called the Remnants. They have loads and loads of abilities which are all about, I'm stubborn, I'm a dwarf, you're not taking me. They're just really hardy and tough and super defensive with loads of fort bonuses and things like that. So that would be probably quite interesting. Then finally, we have Ovdal Kanzad, who are on their own in this other mountain range over here in the east. And you can see that we're standing here on this mountain. Ovdal Kanzad discovered gunpowder. It is 1444. They are already using cannons and artillery and stuff like that. So all of their abilities are to do with getting bigger, more powerful cannons. Literally, that's all they do. So Kanzad is dwarven for cannons. They are literally called hold. I'm guessing Ovdal's like hold cannon, or cannon dwarves, as I like to call them. So that is Ovdal Kanzad. Now, it was pointed out to me that there are a couple of other dwarves around. I was most interested in playing the underground stuff and basically reclaiming the dwarven territories. So there was a poll. That poll is basically shut. I mean, it was pretty overwhelmingly in favour of one of those factions, which we will talk about in a moment. But yeah, it got 27 votes. The nearest was 18, which was the holdout dwarves, the Remnants. So these... there are a couple of others, which is what I was just saying. Like we said, there was Silverforge, who are the Anbennar territory over here. Silverforge. Then we've got the Northern guys, who are another remnant, actually. These are also an original, but these are all the exiles and the outcasts from the original Dwarven Empire, which did cover this whole area. The original Dwarven Empire was like all of this. Particularly this bit. The Dwarven capital is actually right there. Currently occupied by orcs, and I think that no matter which Dwarven faction we play as, our ultimate ambition is to retake control of the Dwarven capital, which, like I said, is right there. So these guys were the outcasts and the exiles from the former Dwarven realms, and they basically created their own nation. And because they're so far north, they're in such a dangerous area, it's a meritocracy. This is as close to... Actually, I'm a little bit surprised that they are not actually a republic, because all of their ideals and all of their ideas are all about, like, meritocracy. So, yeah, they have held. They are the northernmost dwarves. They have some really good bonuses if you manage to survive for that long, and obviously you have this little area of mountain that you can expand into. Then apparently there is another group. Meritocracy, but only if you agree. That are the boat dwarves, which I didn't know about until I'd already created the poll and everything. So where are the boat dwarves? Orange on the coast. These guys? No, they're Canorian. Oh! Ovdal Tunga, these guys. Yep, they are dwarves. Okay, so apparently there are actually boat dwarves, which I didn't know about. But they're not in the mountains. They'd be like Barrack Gold. Naval Dwarves. Prestige, Marine Force Limit, Dwarven Hospitality, Trade Stirring, Naval Leader Fire, Fort Maintenance, Fort Defense, Naval Maneuver, Colonial Range, Trade Range, Production Efficiency, Heavy Ship Combat Ability, Durability. Wow, their ships are really good. Ironclads? Yeah, Ironclads. Infantry Combat, Shock Damage, and then Light Ship Combat Ability. Okay, they're quite good. Might have to try them in the future. I didn't know they existed, because they didn't exist in the Children of Dwarven bookmark, which is what I was using as a basis for all of this. So, what else am I saying? Who else are we going to be up against? Well, there are a bunch of... Yes, Faceless, I know, thanks. Orc groups. So, like I said, the Greentide spilled out into the world of man, conquered all of that stuff, but there are still groups of orcs, like tribes which are starting to coalesce once more and are basically scrambling to become the dominant power in the orcish nations. So you've got like the Blade Breakers, you've got the Harsh Grinders, you've got the Severed Ears, you've got the Clouded Eyes. These guys are all out here as well, which will be the main rivals for the human and dwarven kingdoms, which are starting to rise. And then you've also got Greentide nations here underground. So for example, Darkscale, Siegebreaker, Darkscale are actually kobolds, the Mire Moors, the Mountain Sharks, Ripe Skulkers, etc. Who are also going to be in the caverns. They're also going to be trying to repopulate this and providing a bit of a obstacle, barricade to the dwarven interests in retaking the realm. Plus, of course, you've got the Shattered Crown sitting in the capital of the Dwarven realms. And as has been pointed out to me a couple of times in chat, there are the ability to move between some of these areas. So, for example, I know that Dwarvarod 9 actually connects to Verkal Vaztron? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And they basically use the straight system from EU4 to create underground tunnels to connect some of these tunnels. So, for example, I would imagine that the northern tunnel is probably a straight across here, for example, which connects these to these. Then there's probably a connection between here and here, possibly here and here. So there are ways of progressing underground between the different mountain ranges, which I do think is pretty cool. Basically going under the various passes and rivers and things like that. I do think it's a little less realistic that this one is connected to other stuff. I mean, it's the capital, so it kind of makes sense that it is, but I kind of liked the idea that this was just Erebor sitting off on its own, and then you had all like the dwarven farming in the valley here to basically feed everyone that was underground. That's the way I would have done it, but they have a different system, and that's cool too. So, that is how the dwarven setup of this looks. Now, there is one other area I should probably discuss, and it's this. This den of iniquity, this disgusting haven of villainous scoundrels, known as the Elves. This is the Deep Forest. I think that's what it's called. And it's actually got kind of an interesting lore. So there was a big war between the Anbennar kingdoms and the Elves versus somebody, but I'm not 100% sure who exactly it was they were fighting. But a whole bunch of the elves, the moon elves as they're called over here, went into the forest and got lost. Yes, that's right. Elves got lost in the forest. And they decided to stay. And in time became the wood elves. So you got the wood elves over here, who are basically just the lost elves. I'm actually going to start calling them just the elves who got lost. So you got the wood elves over here. You've also got a couple of other races, like I think there are kobolds, so wood elf. Green orcs, like this whole area is just green orcs. Because the Greentide, forest goblins. Okay, it's mostly just green orcs and forest goblins. But you got all of that. Now, there are other races all over the place. So, for example, these guys are the ogres. These guys are the centaurs. These guys are the harpies. These guys are hobgoblins. Yeah, so there is a lot of different stuff going on. And then there's also a couple of other areas which it is possible to get to. This is EU4 after all, and it does cover roughly the same time period as EU4 proper. So this is 1444 in our time, kind of, though they have their own day, month, year system. So technology will be progressing through that time. There are different eras which you can go through and starts unlocking other things. Are there humans? Yeah, the humans are in the Dame's Head region, so all of this is human. mostly. Right, let me catch up on chat. Let me just see what you guys are saying. Do. All the remnants are originals, I believe. Ovdal Kanzad also is held out for a while. Yes, so I wasn't sure about that because in the lore for the dwarves it does say that these holds are of different ages, but it specifically says that Ovdal Ludum is like the original. That's why they're called the remnants. So I think these are like the most traditional. These are the holdouts of the Empire, whereas the other holds emerged over time. Like Oddstand, just because of the fact that they've already mined out all the diamonds, sounds like it's been there a long time as well. But the one that actually says we're the oldest are the, well, we're the originals is these guys. So I don't know, like I said, whether some of these holds are newer, like since the Dwarven Realms fell. I don't know exactly when the Dwarven Realms fell. There are still a few things which are a little bit muddy to me. I've read through the big lore document, but my memory is not perfect, and probably everything isn't there. Because one of the best things you can do in storytelling is tell it while you're playing, like, through the game, rather than just information dumping. Let's see. Ovdal Kanzad didn't fight any orcs, they were fighting goblins. You did those ideas, best contribution you did? Oh, nice, Chasm. Even the leader's name is Powderkeg, is it? That I had missed. Where are they? They are here. It is as well. Kragan Powderkeg. Kragaran. Nice. Guys off there on the mountain range, there is my vote. Unfortunately, the vote's already gone up and happened. This is why Discord's so important. Like, if you want to be involved with votes and things like that, Discord very often is where I post stuff first. So if you want to vote, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is a pre-gone conclusion, but if you would like to vote, because we haven't actually started yet, this would be our opportunity to do so. Now that we've gathered a couple more people coming in, now that I've been able to sit down and say, right, this is the overview, head over to our Discord. If someone does !Discord, you can get over there, go to the poll section, and then make your vote, depending on what you would like to see. Like I said, no boat dwarves, unfortunately, because I didn't know they existed, because they're not part of the Children of Dwarven. And I don't think they were listed in any of the other bookmarks, at least that I saw. So in the future, we'll have to try them. Huzzah! Hey Lambert, how are you doing? Was this setting created for the mod, or is it something that's pre-existing? Pre-existing. He made it for his uni dissertation. I wonder if he did creative writing. Now I'm wishing I did something like this. That would have been a much better use of my dissertation. I mean, my dissertation was good as well. Well, it wasn't dissertation, it was portfolio. I did a story about an Olympic fencer who survived in the London Underground after a nuclear attack on... It's basically Metro, but in London.